A token can say $1 and still leave you with 4 separate questions: who issued it, what supports it, where can it be redeemed, and what happens when many people want out at once.
The word stable is doing a great deal of unpaid work there.
Exactly. In this episode, stablecoin means a crypto asset designed to track a reference value, often a currency. Designed to track isn't the same as guaranteed to hold. We aren't recommending a coin, exchange, wallet, or cash strategy. We're teaching the questions behind the label.
My first wrong guess was that a peg means the price can't move. It means the system is trying to maintain a relationship. The mechanism matters. Some designs point to off-chain reserve assets, some use on-chain collateral, and some rely more heavily on algorithms and incentives.
We have seen fixed promises before. The promise is never the balance sheet.
Here's the working map. An issuer or protocol creates units. A reserve or collateral arrangement is supposed to support the peg. A holder needs a route to sell or redeem. Each arrow can have different terms, delays, counterparties, and risks.
So I should not ask only, is it $1 today? I should ask, what would make $1 available to me tomorrow?
That's the better question. Federal Reserve research notes that loss of confidence, collateral pressure, or concerns about custody can trigger a run dynamic. The page isn't a forecast about any particular token. It explains why a label can't do the risk analysis for you.
A dollar sign isn't a due diligence department.
There's another distinction worth making. A market quote and a redemption commitment can be connected without being identical. A quote is what a buyer and seller are willing to trade at in a venue at a moment. A redemption commitment is a claim described in terms between a holder and an issuer if the holder qualifies and can use that route. When people compress those into $1, they erase the questions that decide whether the relationship can hold under pressure.
That means a price screen can be useful information without being the whole answer. I need to know whether the screen is showing a broad market, a specific venue, a thin period, or a route I personally can't use. My read is that the word stable should make me slow down, not speed up, because it hides several contracts and operational steps behind a single friendly label.
There's a reason this vocabulary deserves patience. In an ordinary conversation, people use cash, deposit, balance, price, reserve, collateral, and redemption as if they all answer the same question. They don't. A bank account balance may be governed by one set of contracts and protections. A market price reflects trading conditions. Collateral is an asset supporting a stated arrangement. A reserve is a described pool held for a purpose. Redemption is a contractual or operational route. The words overlap in a headline. They separate under stress. Liam, that's not semantic fussiness. It's how a viewer learns which document to open when a claim feels too tidy.
Before you move money because a name sounds cash-like, pause on the 4 words: issuer, reserve, redemption, access. Which one would you have trouble explaining right now? Real quick, because this next part matters to you. If any of this is helping, tap that like button, then hit subscribe and ring the bell so the next one finds you. Both are free and take about a second, but they tell the algorithm to show this to one more person who needs it. Professor Havel, if a token is said to be backed, what does backed actually need to mean before a viewer treats that word as useful?
And before we answer, the desk isn't handing out a scorecard. Backing is a mechanism to inspect, not a license for us to crown a winner.
Start with the reference asset and then trace the claim. Is there an identified issuer? What assets are said to support outstanding units? Who holds them? Who has a right to redeem, under what terms, and through what route? Backed without those answers is a headline, not a mechanism.
That last part matters. A holder may have a token, while the direct redemption relationship belongs to somebody else.
Wait, if an app lets me buy and sell, I can always redeem directly with the issuer?
Not necessarily. Selling on a platform, transferring on a network, and redeeming from an issuer are different paths. Terms, eligibility, fees, identity checks, minimums, geography, and outages can change the path available to a particular person. Read the path you would actually use.
Think of the flow as 3 questions, not 1. First, what supports the unit? Second, who owes performance? Third, how does this holder reach that party? A liquid reserve can matter, but it doesn't erase operational or access frictions.
That's less glamorous than a price chart. It's also much closer to the question I would need answered.
Good. Glamour has never improved a redemption queue.
New York DFS guidance for issuers it regulates is a useful example of why the route matters. Its guidance calls for clear redemption policies and timely par redemption for lawful holders, subject to disclosed terms and legal conditions. That's not a claim that every token or every platform gives every viewer that route. Consider a deliberately plain example. Jordan obtains a dollar reference token through a platform for a payment-related purpose. Jordan then learns that the issuer's direct redemption page has separate eligibility, account, identity, minimum, fee, and jurisdiction terms. That doesn't prove a problem. It shows why possession of a token, a platform balance, and a direct issuer relationship are different facts. A good viewer doesn't fill the gap with an assumption just because every screen uses the same dollar symbol.
And the counterparties aren't decorative. An issuer may have a reserve policy, a custodian may hold assets, a platform may provide a trading or account route, a network may process transfers. The viewer need not memorize the industry's furniture, but should notice when an explanation silently swaps one entity for another. Asking who owes what to whom is old-fashioned finance language because it remains useful when the technology nouns change.
Let's make that usable without making it a scavenger hunt. If I encounter a stablecoin explanation, I can build a one-page fact sheet. At the top, the stated reference asset and mechanism. Next, the named issuer or protocol and links to the current terms. Then, the disclosed reserve or collateral description, including the date of the disclosure. Then, the path I would use to obtain, transfer, sell, or redeem. Finally, the conditions that could block that path, such as geography, account status, network fees, platform terms, or timing. I don't have to reach a yes or no verdict from the sheet. The sheet prevents me from pretending I already have one. So back to the title word, stable may describe the target, but a holder still has to inspect the machinery underneath.
A reserve report can be useful. The mistake is treating one document word as the end of the analysis.
This is where I get lost. I see attestation, audit, reserves, and a big confidence word, then my brain starts filing everything under probably checked.
An understandable filing system, a disastrous one.
An attestation and an audit aren't interchangeable labels. A report has a scope, a period, management assertions, criteria, and sometimes limitations. The educational move isn't to declare either good or bad. It's to read what was actually examined and what was not.
So the word I need is scope, not reassurance.
Yes, New York DFS guidance illustrates the specificity. It calls for a certified public accountant to attest to management assertions about reserve market value, units outstanding, adequacy of reserves, and compliance with imposed reserve conditions at stated points in time. A viewer should still read the actual issuer report and its terms rather than borrow comfort from a different document.
A report date isn't a time machine. It tells you about the stated moment and stated work.
And if the report says cash equivalents, that doesn't let me skip asking where they're held, what the terms are, or whether I can use the redemption route.
Correct. Keep the questions separated. Reserve composition, custody, disclosure quality, and the holder's access path. One favorable answer doesn't automatically settle the others. My fountain pen drawer has fewer categories than this, and it's already excessive.
Erica has just granted the reserve report more filing requirements than the pens, fairly.
Let me test the boundary. Suppose two reports both use the word reserves. One measures a narrow date, one covers a different period, one describes asset categories, another includes a qualification, and neither tells me whether I personally meet redemption terms. I can't responsibly rank the token from that vocabulary alone. I can create a reading list, what's outstanding, what's described as supporting it, who prepared the report, what date applies, and what would still need separate confirmation.
That's the medium-level skill. It doesn't require a viewer to perform an audit or to infer fraud from an unfamiliar word. It requires refusing two bad shortcuts. A report exists, so every risk is solved, and I don't understand every line, so none of it matters. Documents can narrow a question. They can also reveal what question remains. For a material decision, compare the latest issuer disclosures, account terms, and independent professional guidance appropriate to your facts. One more discipline helps: compare like with like. A monthly report can't be read as if it were real-time data. A statement about a reserve pool can't be read as if it were a promise about every customer interface. A third-party assurance engagement can't be read as if it were a regulator's endorsement. And a well-designed disclosure can't eliminate the possibility that terms, markets, custodians, or technology change after publication. The goal isn't permanent suspicion. It's proportional confidence. The stronger the role the money will play in a person's life, the more current and specific the evidence should be.
Before treating an attestation as a safety badge, read the date, scope, assets, and qualifications. Which of those four would you look for first? Professor Havel, suppose confidence drops quickly. What changes first? The price on a screen, the reserve, or the ability to get through the door?
Any of those can matter, and they can reinforce one another. A market price may move, holders may try to sell or redeem, an issuer may need to liquidate assets, platforms can experience congestion or impose their own conditions. The sequence is fact-specific, not a universal movie script.
That's why a DPEG isn't one single risk. It can be a price deviation, a redemption pressure event, a liquidity event, a custody concern, or an access problem. An explanation that calls all of that volatility leaves the viewer with no next question.
People tend to discover the access question after access becomes inconvenient. That's late research.
If the reserves are large enough, then access can't be the issue. Wait, no, I had that backwards. Reserves and my actual route are related, but they aren't the same question.
Exactly, that correction is the episode. A claim about reserves doesn't tell us whether a particular holder can redeem directly, whether a platform is available, what its limits are, or how a disruption affects the route. Read account terms, issuer terms, and current notices before relying on access.
Federal Reserve research describes a run mechanism in which expectations can change behavior. People may seek to redeem before others, and sales of supporting assets can add pressure. It's an analytical mechanism, not a prediction that a particular holder should rush to act.
The lesson isn't be first in line. The lesson is don't discover the line after joining it.
That distinction is useful. My question becomes, what would I do if the app, the market, or the redemption route stopped behaving normally for a day?
Good. Add a second question. What role is this money supposed to play? Emergency cash, bill payment, an investment position, and an experiment aren't interchangeable jobs. Mixing the jobs is how a convenient payment story quietly becomes an unexamined risk decision.
And outside a general mechanism, the current answer belongs in the specific terms, current disclosures, and, if relevant, a regulated professional's review. I would rather draw that boundary than invent certainty from a panel desk.
Professor Havel, thank you. You gave us the right stress test. Support, access, and the purpose of the money. Lewis, here's the part that feels counterintuitive. A person may be right about the broad mechanism and still be wrong about their own immediate option. They may know that an issuer describes reserves yet hold through an intermediary with its own hours, limits, authentication rules, service interruptions, or geographic restrictions. I am seeing if the outcome will occur. I'm saying a useful risk review asks what exact agreement and channel the person would rely on if conditions stopped feeling ordinary.
This is also why we will not turn a past stress event into a countdown clock. A historical DPEG or run can teach mechanism, but it doesn't supply a universal probability or a personal instruction. The transferable lesson is to distinguish market liquidity from redemption liquidity, and both from account access. When you hear a claim that something is fully backed, ask what that phrase establishes, what it doesn't establish, and whose terms govern the next step.
There's a practical record-keeping angle too. If someone can't explain their route on a calm afternoon, they will not gain clarity from a fast-moving screen. Save current issuer disclosures, the account agreement that actually applies, the redemption or transfer terms, and a dated note of what role the money was meant to play. That record doesn't eliminate risk. It makes later questions answerable and helps distinguish what the documents promised from what a casual post merely implied. It's the opposite of panic. Preparation while the facts are still readable. A stable label isn't an emergency plan. It's an invitation to read one.
Now for the part that attracts the loudest answers online, regulatory status. The disciplined answer is often, which product, which facts, which jurisdiction, and what's current today.
So a headline that says regulated or not a security might not settle the token in front of me?
It may not. The Seconds Division of Corporation Finance issued an April 2025 staff statement about a narrow described set of USD stablecoins, one-to-one USD redemption, sufficiently liquid low-risk reserves at least equal to circulation, and specified circumstances. The statement says it's staff views, not a rule, and that facts can change the analysis.
That's not a loophole. It's the document telling you where its fence is.
And it doesn't cover every design that calls itself stable?
Correct. The statement expressly doesn't give views on algorithmic stablecoins, non-USD reference assets, certain alternative redemption arrangements, or yield-bearing stablecoins. That's why a channel should not turn one paragraph into a permission slip for an entire category.
A permission slip for the category would need a permission slip for the permission slip.
And I'll happily file both. The actual method is simpler. Locate the current primary source, identify its scope and date, compare it with the product's documented facts, and take legal, tax, or suitability questions to a qualified person who can assess your circumstances.
That's more work than sharing a headline. It's also the first process here that could survive a changed rule or changed product. I want to be precise about something viewers see constantly. Regulation can matter without replacing due diligence. A product can fall within a framework, be discussed by a regulator, or use a compliant-sounding phrase, and a viewer can still have unanswered questions about issuer terms, reserves, access, taxes, price risk, fraud, or whether the use fits their situation. Regulation is evidence about a legal and supervisory setting. It's not a magic word that converts a complicated product into a personal recommendation.
The calendar matters too. A current source can change. A staff view has a date. A statute may need implementation. State and federal treatment can differ. A foreign viewer may be dealing with another jurisdiction entirely. Therefore, the responsible sentence isn't "the law says stablecoins are safe" or "the law says they're forbidden." It's find the current primary source that applies to this product and this place, then ask a qualified professional about the part that's personal.
Before we get to the final cash question, notice what this method protects against. It protects against using the word regulated as a substitute for reading. It protects against using an old article as a current legal conclusion. It protects against transferring the treatment of one design to another because both use a similar label. And it protects against a subtler mistake. Assuming a legal category answers whether a particular product, account route, or risk level fits a person's goals. Erica, the source check process isn't a burden added after learning. It's the learning.
And a useful source check ends with an explicit uncertainty line. What has the primary source established? What has it expressly left outside scope? What facts about the product do I still need to verify? What facts about the viewer are unavailable to an education channel? That final list is where a broker, bank, lawyer, tax professional, or regulated advisor may enter, depending on the question. No one should need a creator's confidence to replace their own review of current terms, current law, and their own circumstances. Precisely, regulation isn't a vibe, and no current status explanation should be treated as legal advice. Verify the source again when the decision is live.
We began with a word that sounds like cash. Let's end with the cash question that word can hide. What job does this money need to do for you?
A fair question. People often choose a tool before naming the job.
Name the need first. Near-term bills, emergency reserves, a payment route, exposure to a digital asset ecosystem, or a speculative position. Those needs have different risks, protections, time horizons, and appropriate questions. A stablecoin isn't automatically the answer merely because the need involves dollars or speed.
Right. I keep trying to turn a category lesson into a personal recommendation. That's the move to stop making.
Exactly. This is financial education, not individualized financial, legal, or tax advice. We don't know a viewer's country, account protections, liquidity needs, debt, taxes, platform eligibility, or tolerance for loss. Those missing facts aren't a footnote, they're the decision.
The missing page is usually the page that matters.
So if I'm considering one, I can write questions instead of asking the internet to choose. Who issues it? What supports it? How can I redeem? What would interrupt access? And what current rules apply where I live?
Add one more. Who can review the part I can't see? Your bank or broker can explain its own account features and records. A qualified financial professional can discuss your broader decision. A qualified tax or legal professional can address those personal questions. Ask for documents, not slogans.
My plant rescue instinct says adopt the interesting new thing. My adult note says first read its care instructions and the emergency plan. Different subject, same habit.
At last, the 11 succulents have become a compliance framework.
The conclusion is deliberately modest. Stablecoins can have different designs and potential uses, but a name doesn't answer reserve, redemption, access, legal, or personal suitability questions. Keep the questions separate and verify the current documents before acting. A cash management need deserves the same care as an investment need, sometimes more. If money is allocated for rent, payroll, tuition, taxes, or an emergency, the relevant questions can include availability, insurance, or other protections where applicable, transfer timing, counterparty exposure, operational resilience, and account terms. Those aren't arguments against technology. They're reasons to match the tool to the job instead of treating novelty, yield language, or a dollar reference as a substitute for a plan. That creates a more honest conversation with a bank, broker, or advisor. A viewer can say what the money is for, how quickly it may be needed, what account and jurisdiction apply, and what risk needs to be avoided. Then they can ask what the institution's own product does and doesn't do. That's not asking someone online to bless a ticker or a wallet. It's bringing a defined question to someone who can inspect the relevant documents and personal facts.
That boundary also protects against product drift. A person may begin by looking for a quick payment route and end up holding an asset for a long period because moving it became inconvenient, or because a promotion made waiting sound clever. The original purpose should remain visible. If the job changes, redo the review rather than letting yesterday's convenience become today's unexamined portfolio decision. No educational episode can perform that review for a stranger, but it can teach the stranger what has changed and where to seek a grounded answer.
If this helped you trade a slogan for a real checklist, like and subscribe to Investing Explained. We build financial understanding one document and one question at a time. Last question, before relying on something called stable, which document would you need to read first? Take care. Keep the label attached to the mechanism, and we will see you in the next lesson.